Past week's Parashat, we have the sequence when Noach family come out of the Teva and plants a vineyard, makes wine, gets drunk, and compromises himself, and his few different versions of how he's violated by his grandson Chom. Shem and Yefet want to correct the situation. The Pasuk says that it's a terrible embarrassment to them, to Noach. There are two different points of view, and it's reflected from the Psukim. Pasuk says, Vayikach Shem v'Yefet. Shem and Yefet took the simla, the garment. V'yasimu al Shem shnehem, and they put it on their shoulders. V'yechu achoronit, and they walked backwards. V'yechasu es elvas avim, v'es elvas avim lo yro'u. So Rashi already brings that Shem made more effort, took more initiative in the mitzvah. The diuk seems to be that there are 5 verbs in the sentence, and only the first, vayikach, is in the singular. The other 4 are in the plural. The Netziv explains what is being told to us here. That there are 2 different worldviews. There's a worldview of Shem, and there's a worldview of Yefet. The worldview of Shem is that there is good and evil in the world. There's a reality, there's a metzius, an actuality of tov v'ra. Mitzvah is when I comply with the will of my Creator. How do I know what that will is? Through nevuah. A certain amount I can get to through using my rational faculties, but the Rebbeinu Shalom has shown to mankind what it is that is expected of them through prophecy as well. Through prophecy primarily. So when I fulfill the plan that the Creator had for the universe, that is doing His command, the Rebbeinu Shalom's plan for mankind, fulfillment, through doing the good which has me connect to the source, to the Creator. That's be'etzem, essentially connecting to good and rejecting the evil. Says the Netziv, Yefet has a different worldview. He doesn't work from the premise that there is good and evil in the world. He doesn't work from the premise that there has been prophecy and that the Rebbeinu Shalom has granted mankind this access to the divine will. Man is just a more complex, sophisticated animal. But because he's more complex and he's more sophisticated, he needs the aesthetic as a palliative to soften the hurt of being mortal and being merely an animal. It softens, it reduces the pain of being mortal and being animalistic. Not because it's good and evil, but because it works on my emotions, my feelings, uses a certain kind of connection to the intellect, which is just a more complex kind of a creature, but it's an aesthetic experience, not a moral experience. So Yefet and Shem both witness this terrible situation. They both want to see it corrected, but for different reasons. Since Shem is proceeding from the premise that doing the good, the mitzvah, provides nourishment, nutrients for my soul, I would like to be the expediter of it. I would like to be the one who fulfills the mitzvah. Because it does something for me as well. And I'm fulfilling what I'm here for. That's my purpose. Yefet initially is satisfied to be a spectator. If it can be done without me, tovei lehem bracha, all well and good. My premise, says Yefet, is not that it does something for my soul. The aesthetic experience provides a certain kind of pleasure, a little bit different, or very different, than the simple physiological pleasure, but it's a fusion of the emotions and the intellect just because man has developed as a more complicated creature. So Yefet stands on the side and waits to see how well Shem will fare. But it's a bit tricky. It's an acrobatic stunt, walking backwards, not looking. So suddenly, Yefet comes to the conclusion that I think he needs me to help. I want to get it done for different reasons, but I also want to get it done. So Yefet joins in after the initiative is taken by Shem. And they go together. The first verb in the sentence, vayikach. Then, vayelchu shneim, yachta, v'yechasu, v'sev v'zavihem, and v'sev v'zavihem loyrol, right? 5 verbs, 4 are in the plural, the first is in the singular. The rewards, Rashi brings Chazal, must be midah keneged midah, measure for measure. It must correspond to what their motivation and what in fact they did, what was done. Yefet gets burial. In major wars, which war? Burial is merely to differentiate between this more sophisticated creature called man and an animal. The carcass of an animal is left to decay on the surface of the earth. Human beings get buried because it's offensive. It violates my aesthetic sensitivities. That's kvura. Midah keneged midah. Measure for measure. Tzitzis is given to Shem. It's a garment. Step 1. Step 2. Meshech Chochmah says that in the mitzvah of tzitzis, Parashat Shlach, that the strings of the tzitzis contribute nothing to the primary garment per se. They don't add to the warmth or to the beauty of it. They're just raw material hanging strings at the four edges of the garment. That symbolizes the Ribbono Shel Olam's invitation to man to partner in completing the universe that the Ribbono Shel Olam left necessarily for us to complete. Obviously, the Ribbono Shel Olam didn't have to do it that way, but its infinite wisdom, that is the way he decided to do it. Like Rabbi Akiva tells Tonis Rufus, he says, if the Ribbono Shel Olam wanted man circumcised, why didn't he create him that way? He said, no, the Ribbono Shel Olam, do you see rolls, bagels growing on the trees out there in the field? No, you see wheat. And it goes through a lot of steps before it's processed to get to the point where you have the bagel on your table. The Ribbono Shel Olam gave us raw material, the material world, and spiritually, to perfect, improve, complete ourselves. Because that's the ultimate good for us. Talmud Chochem that brings the discussion, the Shmaitza, Liba, the Hilchasa, brings it down to its halachic conclusion, is called a partner with the Ribbono Shel Olam. We have the sequence about the famous Bas Kol, the issue of whether or not to listen to a Bas Kol, or no, it's given over to mankind. Lo b'shamayim hi. Man has to complete it. Because that's the way the Ribbono Shel Olam has given us the opportunity to achieve our perfection, approximate it, and even saying Vayachulu, Friday night, testifying, giving witness to the Ribbono Shel Olam's creation of the universe is called partnering with the Ribbono Shel Olam. Audacious concept, but so has the Ribbono Shel Olam created the world and us. And tzitzis represents, says Rabbi Simcha, the raw material. That it's not woven into the garment. It's not part of the fabric of the cloth per se. It's just hanging there. Not particularly unless you associate the significance and the meaning of it through the ages, not particularly adding to the beauty of the beged either. So now halachically, midoraisa, I don't have to go out midoraisa, I don't have to go out and purchase a four-cornered garment to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis. If I happen to have a four-cornered garment that I'm going to wear, I have to wear tzitzis. But midirabonon, rabbinically, we're taught that in a time of stringent application of din, of justice, it's a safety measure, it's security, it's protection. And so Jews have undertaken to add the B'nai Shem, the children of Shem, have been singularly proactive, taking the initiative. What's a more perfect expression of taking initiative than to put yourself in the situation that you are now fulfilling the mitzvah? You didn't have to do that. Yeah, but the Rabbanan say, it's good. good for you, it's good for the world. And we behave accordingly, proactive, not to be merely reactive. Many years ago, I'm talking about probably it was 1956, 57. I heard a lecturer, a Jew from Manchester, a Masorati Jew, wrote some interesting books, give a lecture in Baltimore. It's basically using the thesis of approximately what the Netziv just said, but he hadn't seen the Netziv. He wrote a book called The Gentleman and the Jew. He said the distortion and perversion that was introduced by the Greeks in the domination of the aesthetic led to a sense of the dual. Medieval times and followed up through pretty modern era. The cowboy movie, the showdown at OK Corral. As long as you're equally armed, I can kill you. For what? For having said something I didn't like, for insulting me. But it's fair. Fair is an aesthetic judgment, not a moral judgment, not a spiritual evaluation. The gentleman, playing according to the rules, that's fair. Fair is aesthetics. Equally armed. Samuel wrote in his book and said, "What are you, crazy? Because he said something you didn't like? So what if he's equally armed? So you're a better shot than him or a better swordsman than him? So you're going to kill him for that?" If you're dealing with a Hitler, Yamach Shemai, or a Stalin, Yamach Shemai, that's evil. You shoot him in the back if you have the opportunity. It's not about fairness. It's about good and evil. I went over to Mr. Samuels. Afterwards, I said, he was not wearing a kippah. And I asked him, I told him, I have sources for what you're saying. How do you define yourself? He said, I guess I'm a non-performing religious Jew. I've met a fair amount of those through the years. Just incidentally, he created another Kiddush Hashem in that he wrote another book taking apart a British historian who had said, he was the doyen of British historians, I hesitate to mention his name, said that the Jews are a fossilized people. They're no longer contributing to world civilization. He took them apart on that too. There is a brilliant debate. Yaakov Herzog, Zichron Levrocha, was Reb Lezer Yudel Zatzal, the Rosh Yeshiva of Mir, was very makarav Yaakov Herzog when he was here, and he was in charge of the Prime Minister's office. Made a big Kiddush Hashem, Yaakov Herzog, when he was in the ambassador to Canada and refused to speak on Shabbos from a microphone in a so-called Orthodox shul in Ottawa. But he also challenged this historian to a debate. And even the top magazines and reporters at the time said that Herzog bested him. He got a very, very reluctant apology. That historian's statement had been that the greatest crime that Hitler will have to answer for on the Day of Judgment is what he allowed the Jews to do to the Arabs. Because had he not done what he did to the Jews, the world would not have tolerated the Jews coming and taking away Arab lands. There was an objective historian. But anti-Semitism has much more to talk about that in a different forum. There's insidious ways of seeping in. Proactive Am Yisrael symbolizes the being proactive to connect to our source. It's all about why are we here, what's the purpose, and how do we go about fulfilling it? Not just tolerating, softening, not just some kind of a way of reducing the pain of how life tends to so frequently disappoint us. The gap between where we are and where we want to be. Tzitzis. Mishnah Berurah brings that the Torah Jew, like a soldier has his uniform. And he takes pride in being part of that tzibur, of that community. It's inspirational to him to plug in to the larger group. He's contributing to them by his declaration of being part of the larger group. And that in turn gives him an aliyah, gives him that sense of ascendancy. In a certain way, that's the differentiation as well between Noach and Avram, this coming week's Parsha. Avram first Ohr Somayach on the planet, a nefesh asher also b'choron. Noach built a teva. The plan was that it should be over an extended period of time so people should come and ask, what's it for, what's going on? Give them an opportunity to do tshuva. But it wasn't going out to the hustings to preach and teach. It wasn't Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. That Avram did. He initiated. Avram created a tzibur. seems to be very important also to take note that of the tzibur that Avram created, HaNefesh HaSha'osa B'choron, his whole methodology, as the Medrash teaches us, how he went about doing it by reaching out to them, hospitality, v'chulu. They didn't remain. They were chayzer l'suram. But he changed the world because it happened one time on this planet. Because it happened meant that it was a different world then. I've seen historians that want to try and trace some possibility of remnants of some impressions that were left, but it's a moot question. It's open for discussion whether or not, on the most apparent level, nothing was left of them ultimately. But it changed the world. So we have to ask ourselves, al achas kama v'kama, fellows 840 yorai, it's a kavachema ben benoishel kavachema. If you can and do see people, families, generations that are changed and changing their communities, their world, how does that affect and fulfill our partnership, relationship, the invitation that the Rebbeinu Shalom has given us to be proactive? What's happening here, beginning of Azman, another daf, another Rashi, another Tosfos, exploration of the different shittas. We're working from the premise that it changes me. I am a different person because I understood this Tosfos, because I understood this Ritva. Something is happening inside my neshama. I'm connecting to the source because this is the Rebbeinu Shalom's plan. Post-Sinai, post-redaction of Torah Shebal Peh, by Ravina Ravashi. This is the code to unlock who and what we are as Yechidim and as part of this nation that has been commissioned with this goal of Tikkun Olam. There are those along the way that take this piece, that piece, the theoretics, without application. Anything that's positive, we applaud. But you don't have to be a historian to take note that they all collapse, fail, and disappear. The non-Jewish versions and the Jewish imitations of those versions. This Beis Medrash connects to all Botei Midrashim in time and in space. It's one conversation that's going on here and a few blocks away in the Mira Yeshiva, and a few kilometers from here in Ponevezh, and in Gateshead, and in Lakewood, and around the world. But also historically, We're connecting to every Beis Medrash, and we are transforming ourselves and the world with every piece of the mosaic that we put into place. Shem Yitain, that with all of the extraordinary strangeness of the past few years, the din, the chesed, the syncopated interaction, the rhythm of divine providence, monitoring, changing the world, and somehow always at the forefront, Eretz Yisrael, Am Yisrael, and Reb Yisrael. Shem Yitain, that we should have the schus to fulfill, each one of us, our potential, and as we fulfill our potential, to have the further schus to share it with our brethren, with Klal Yisrael. Should have a healthy, spiritually, physically, winter, Zman, and the simcha of putting together the pieces of the puzzle reaches a point, and that's another discussion for another time, where the good and the beautiful come together. V'harevno, the mesikus, comes together when we dig down in depth. Hatzlocha u'brocha.